Well, we're getting another week started here at Kelly & Company, and on today's show, calcium alone is not enough for living with strong bones. What the heck else should we be eating then? Well, gotta find something to keep our bones healthy. Nutritionist Julia Karantjas explains later on in the show. And traveler JJ Hunt describes his favorite night market feasts. Yummy again, folks. What better way to travel than to sample food at night? But let's be fair, ladies and gentlemen, I know what he really means. Anytime is good for eating.
This is Kelly & Company.
And appreciate you out there, the company, being with us whenever you can as we launch into another program here. You can find us, of course, via podcast. You can find us on AMI Audio daily. We kick off our first edition of the show at 2 p.m. Eastern, and then it's repeated throughout the next day. But I do want to draw some attention to something we had started doing, and I brought it up here on the program, the audio vanity cards. And I was noticing on YouTube some people taking in the history, how this particular show started many moons ago. I did a little talk, couple of part talk on YouTube. So do check out our YouTube page if you want to find out a little bit about that. Just do a search for Kelly & Company if you wouldn't mind to subscribe to it. Always love to know you're out there. But there's a real variety of content from the show that you can take into account, and some older stuff sitting there that you can peruse through, especially if we're new to you. But yes, look for the short little discussions that we put out there. We drop them on Saturdays. You can find them on our podcast and out there on YouTube. You can do that by subscribing using your podcast platform of choice. And while you're in there too, if you would, give us a rating and review. It's the middle of the night and your dog wakes you up, frantically trying to get outside. Wondering what's up, you go over, let him out, and find out he's passing blood everywhere. He seemed okay when you went to bed, but now he's asking to go out every 30 minutes, and there's blood. Is this an emergency, or can it wait until morning? Dr. Danielle Jongkind joins us, who has some tips, tricks, and tools to help us decide how to handle these types of situations. Danielle, welcome. And my goodness, as I'm saying that little depiction, that description, it kind of makes you just shake and say, wow. Do veterinarians experience any panic when their own pets get sick?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, of course, but I know that the rational part of my mind sometimes needs to talk the emotional part off the ledge when my own pets get sick, you know. Out of necessity, of course, you know, veterinarians have to maintain some professional distance from their clients' anxiety about their pet's condition. And of course, that's a lot harder to do when it's your own pet that's sick, of course. You know, but, you know, you can't really do your job if you're so emotionally invested that it affects your decision-making capacities. And, you know, but you also have to recognize, you know, that maintaining that distance is a delicate balancing act. You know, you can't really divorce yourself from emotions completely either. So, you know, you have to have this balance where you temper that logical, rational facts about what's happening with compassion and understanding, and that will usually get you the best outcome. And you know, it's funny because the hardest part about doing that for a client is actually remembering that, you know, we all sort of look at the world from our own viewpoint. And you actually sometimes have to remember as a veterinarian that your clients don't have your training and they don't understand their pet's illness the way that you do.
Right.
And sometimes they panic over things that seem like a really big deal to them, even when the condition wasn't serious or life-threatening. And, you know, I always remember experiencing that kind of panic myself with my first baby. So for the first few months of his life, you know, he'd be awake screaming from midnight to 2 a.m. every single night, and nothing, not feeding, changing, walking, rocking, singing, nothing, you know, would settle that baby to go back to sleep. So by about 1:30 a.m. every night, this despair would set in. And I remember very clearly thinking to myself, he must be dying. You know, I should take him to the hospital right now because clearly something is really wrong. And then the rational part of my brain would spend the next half hour reminding me that, wait a minute, he did this every night at the same time, and he had still woken up every single morning. He had been fine all day. He was just a baby, and they do this stuff sometimes. But I still
it's so
remember.
hard because you get into that mind speak. And even with, like you say, your pet. Now, of course, I remember you have the guinea pig. You and the family have the guinea pig because I'm fascinated by the structure and thing. Those were cool things. And I remember other kids I knew having neat stuff like that. And they'd say, oh yeah, we built this, for the rabbit has that. And oh, that's great. Well, if you get a pet, no, that won't happen. I'll just live vicariously through you. That's awesome. But how many pets do you guys have?
Well, our guinea pigs have passed away, unfortunately. We
Oh,
did
I'm
not
sorry.
that's okay. We did not get new ones because the children cannot take them when they move out of the house. And they will outlive the time they
Yes.
have left in the house. So we really only have our little Eve, our little cat right now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So over time, do you feel, especially being that person who does have the knowledge and stuff like that, and not wanting to fall into that trap of, well, I can't divorce my emotions from my pet. I want to enjoy. That's why I have a pet. I want to be able to love and stuff like that. Did you have to do anything? Did you have any problem, or have you been made aware of from another vet? Hey, I had trouble with it. And what is your process if when a pet is ill and needs to go see someone? Are you able to take them and deal with it as much as you can, or have that been the circumstances, or do you have that vet you go to, sort of like when a doctor looks for another doctor to give an opinion?
Oh, you mean with respect to my own pets?
Yeah, with respect to your own.
Well, fortunately, I do work in private practice with other veterinarians. So
One of
usually, if
them.
it's something that, yeah, I feel like, I need an outside opinion here because I don't feel like I can trust my own because it's my own pet. That doesn't happen very often. I can sort of set aside the anxiety and, talk myself off the ledge and say, okay, you know what? This is no different than any other pet. Just think of it that way.
Right.
But, if I do need another opinion, usually I will ask one of my coworkers, and just say, hey, what do you think about this? And then, like I say, when I see that client having that moment of like, my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so panicked, you know, um, I need to understand, wait, they don't know what's going on. They're
Right.
really worried. And I
Yeah.
have to remember that, even though this might not be an emergency, I remember that situation with my son in the middle of the night. Like, you're just as susceptible, you need to remember
Yes.
this is what's going on. So, you need a plan to deal with this too. Not
What,
just
but
the
how do you
medical
deal
stuff,
with the
but to
ones, Danielle, that have a lot of knowledge and are kind of like, yeah, but I think, and when you stop and say, geez, they could be right. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that, I'm not saying another vet, but just that keen person who does a lot of research, but not necessarily over researching themselves. Is that a good thing?
well, it is a good thing. Like, I think that, it's really important for people to understand what's going on. And, and that, veterinarians are people just like everybody else. And if you have information or, you're not really sure what to do with that information, or you think you know what's going on, to bring that forward and discuss it with your veterinarian, because again, a lot of times veterinarians spend a lot of time explaining things to clients and saying, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I think we should do. And, so if someone, is able to sort of put that into the context of what they know already, or maybe, that would be helpful, and maybe they've, come across some misinformation and we can say, actually, I don't think that's quite accurate. This is the way I look at it and this is why, then sometimes you have an opportunity to correct that misinformation and help someone
Yes.
make a better decision, right? So I don't think that it's a bad thing that clients look things up at all. I think it's a bad thing when they replace their veterinarian with looking things up because, I think that sometimes, when you don't have the training, you're not really sure, okay, well, what is accurate, what is not. But
Yeah.
definitely like bring that forward. That's important.
And the means too. Obviously, you don't have the equipment, you don't have everything there, you don't have the biggest one of all, the experience. Okay, Danielle. So, what should we do when these things happen and we start getting concerned? Do I need extra support? Do I need the help? Sort of like what you went through with your son.
Well, I think it sort of comes to a thing where, there's urgent conditions, versus emergency conditions, and, people kind of want to know, what should I drop everything for? And, what can wait until morning? Like when you gave your example of, your dog goes out at 2 a.m. and you're like, look at this situation.
Yeah.
Should I drop everything and run right now or should I not? So I mean, I can give you some ideas, but a lot of things, if you're not sure, there's tools and tricks for that too. So, of course, a lot of emergencies are obvious. If your animal is in severe pain or has just had major trauma, like getting hit by a car, for example, obviously that's an emergency and you need to drop everything and deal with that right away. Any pet that's unconscious or unresponsive, if you pick your pet up, put them on their feet and they fall over,
Mm.
that's an emergency,
Mhm.
other emergencies are a little more subtle, like difficulty breathing isn't always obvious to everyone. A lot of pets pant or show open mouth breathing when they're anxious too, but my benchmark for this is if they're sleeping or at rest, they shouldn't be anxious, So if you see them really heaving for breath constantly, and especially while they're sleeping, that's an emergency. Um, Another one people sometimes miss is urinary obstruction. So, any pet that is straining to pee with nothing or only a few drops of urine coming out is also a potential an emergency. Um, Seizures, seizures that don't stop within 5 minutes, that would be another thing. Um, Regardless of what symptoms you see, though, I'd really consider any illness that came on suddenly and progressed rapidly to be an emergency, especially if your pet seems extremely quiet, lethargic, or unresponsive. And of course, if your pet gets into anything toxic or
Mhm.
swallows
Right.
something indigestible, that would also be an emergency.
It's it's hard because in your position, you don't want to people watching, listening in. You don't want to panic people into jumping the gun. I know a lot of, like you say, very savvy pet owners, and you want people to do things for the right reason. Because unfortunately, sometimes, oh, it's nighttime. I know he's bleeding. I'll wait till the morning because I don't want to spend the money on the emergency clinic at this point because of the cost. And again, you really know that so many out there would say, I'd never do that. I love my pet too much, and that's wonderful. As well as, like we said, the learning things. But is there anything else in cautioning anyone that we should do? Or let's be fair, it's not going to be a problem to go wait and find out, hey, you know what? Nothing's really wrong except, I mean, what do you feel the experience is generally when anyone brings their pet in? There's something that should be attended to.
Sure. And I mean, I think, you could consider those conditions like urgent, meaning ones that should be seen sooner rather than later, but maybe you don't have to run right out the door that second for. Like usually we would consider things like this within the next 12 hours. They're usually conditions that are causing maybe milder pain and discomfort, ones that if they're left untreated, they might lead to more serious outcomes. So, I mean, examples would be things like ear or eye infections,
Mm-hmm.
possibly urinary tract infections, milder cases of vomiting and diarrhea that don't involve eating toxins or
Yes.
indigestible things.
Yes. Or a
And
button or something like that, wedging going inside
yeah,
that
like
you would just
something that
miss and
might
not
get
know.
stuck.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, lameness, unless you know that there's some kind of fracture. I mean, obviously, if there are broken bones, then, you do not wait on that one. And then, of course, we come to some conditions that are commonly mistaken for emergencies, but might not actually be an emergency. They might just be urgent. So, like a ruptured abscess is a good example of this. So, you'll see this soft, maybe painful swelling that comes up on the pet, which you might or might not notice since pets are fuzzy. We don't always see swellings under the skin. And when they break, they pour a lot of pus and blood onto the floor and leave behind what looks like a gaping hole, right?
Good
That
grief.
commonly
Yeah.
happens with anal gland abscesses. And it's very dramatic, right? And again, it's urgent for sure. You should get that
Right.
seen,
Right.
but do you have to run out the door right then and there? No, you could wait till later in the day. Um, Another one I see people panicking over is a condition called reverse sneezing. So, to someone who's never seen a pet reverse sneeze before, it kind of looks like choking or respiratory obstruction. So, you could really see how people are, kind of going, oh my gosh, like what's going on? But reverse sneezing will come and go, and the pet is usually normal in between these episodes. Obviously, choking or respiratory obstructions go on until the obstruction is removed. And the pet might panic or paw at its mouth, turn blue or collapse. And it doesn't just happen randomly. The pet has to eat or inhale something that gets stuck in that airway. So it's usually something that clients notice their pet eating something or scarfing something down right before that happens. And of course, another thing that tends to panic people is bloody diarrhea. And,
Right.
this one's a bit of a gray area. Sometimes it can indicate an emergency, like if it was caused by a bleeding disorder or something. But, sometimes it's just that the rectum or colon is a bit inflamed and irritated, and that's where the blood is coming from. So, like again, there are some things that, we commonly see people calling in saying, wow, this is an emergency. And then they come and we're like, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
just urgent.
Yeah. And you judge that frequency like, oh, this has been happening all week. Yeah, you should have probably come in earlier in the week, but maybe not after the first time because it could be something so simple. And that. But yeah, do notice when you notice that, hey, there's a button missing off the couch. Well, let's see. If we can't find it on the floor, maybe in the couch, look to your pet. Where, since we have telehelp for our little questions to call before they tell you, well, you better just come in. What should we do if we think we have those questions or have a concern for our pet?
So, I can't stress it enough, that if you are not sure if your pet isn't experiencing an emergency, it's best just to get them seen by a veterinarian as soon as possible. So, if you remember this one thing from this whole talk, when in doubt, check it out. Okay. Um, in Ontario, of course, your regular veterinarian has to have some sort of plan in place for providing their clients with medically necessary services after hours. So it's very common for them to refer clients to a local 24-hour care clinic or emergency clinic for this. Some of them may do their own after hours emergencies through an on-call system, or they may share responsibilities between a number of clinics by covering each other's emergencies on a rotating basis. And of course, those last two scenarios are a lot more common in, remote or rural areas. Another newer service that started really taking off during the pandemic is triaging via telemedicine. And so, there are a number of companies now that run telemedicine platforms where you can speak with a veterinary health professional, either a registered veterinary technician or a veterinarian, and who can help assess whether you need to take your pet to an in-person visit right then or not. If that isn't needed, the veterinarians doing the telemedicine may be able to prescribe something that your pet can take until you can get in to see your regular veterinarian. It really depends on their judgment and what they feel is going on. Sometimes, veterinary hospitals have the number for these services on their emergency after hours messaging for their clients. If they don't, you can easily find them online. The only caution I have is to make sure they are operating under the provincial authorities that regulate veterinary medicine in each province. For example, if you live in Ontario, it's only legal for a veterinarian licensed in Ontario to provide you with telemedicine services.
Right.
So, you should make sure that, you have somebody who is licensed where you live. Okay, that's important.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole thing. You want somebody obviously experienced if you want to know it's credible enough that person is up on as much as they can be. I guess you want to think, but mostly just that, hey, this is something that I that is credible that I should be calling. And again, is there just a working reason province to province that we would not have a national, that it would tend to be more provincial? And I noticed that obviously with telehealth, stuff like that. So it's just a licensing thing?
Well, It's a licensing thing. Like, each province has a licensing body for their veterinarians, and they're provincially regulated, right?
Okay.
So, here in Ontario, we have the College of Veterinarians of Ontario who, accredits veterinary facilities, and they license veterinarians to practice. So, veterinarians and veterinary facilities have to go through this whole, licensing and accreditation practice in order to open and provide services. And the reason for that is because these licensing bodies are, their mandate is to protect the public, right? And to make sure that everybody meets a certain benchmark before they can practice here, and so, it's in your best interest to make sure that someone you're taking services from is licensed. That's a requirement. And people who are not licensed to practice in a jurisdiction cannot practice there legally.
Okay, fantastic. As usual, Danielle, absolutely amazing stuff. A lot to think about there, but mostly to just kind of put us at rest. Thank you, Danielle Jongkind, our veterinarian, joining us on the program every couple of weeks right here on Mondays on Kelly and Company. A tuna weighing as much as a grizzly bear. So this is my segue, ladies and gentlemen. Just wait for it. Wait for it. You'll get it in a moment. Sells for $1.3 million in Japan. Now, this is January 5th, so this was last month that this happened. A bluefin tuna sold for $1.3 million at a pre-dawn auction in Tokyo last month, making it one of the most expensive tunas to be sold in the history of sushi. See where we're going? The 608-pound fish, equivalent in weight to a typical male grizzly bear, was caught off the coast of Oma in northern Japan's Memoriya Prefecture. According to Japan's Kyoto News Agency, the fish was sold to a Michelin star Japanese sushi restaurant chain for 207 million yen. Wow, I can't get over that. The size, number one. Making that much sushi, and I'm a sushi fan, but you start saying, what the heck? That would serve the whole chain. So I have to ask Julia Karantjas joining us now. Are you a sushi fan?
Yes, I am a sushi fan. The first time I had sushi was actually in Japan. Ooh. And I had it because I was there. So I like sushi. I enjoy it. I think it's refreshing. It's filling. It's tasty. So I'm definitely a fan.
Okay, so with having it there, as we sit here in Canada and say, wow, there's nothing like Mexican food. I enjoy my Mexican food, where people from Mexico here would, it's so different. And for multiple reasons, different things in a place's homeland where the food comes from. So having it in Japan, the home of sushi for as far as we're concerned, coming back here and having it, did you notice any real difference? I mean, there are a lot of authentic people here serving sushi who know what to do, and so many people who just really like it, who have restaurants who serve it. Or have you ever found it the same as you did there? And I know we're talking maybe one or two examples that you had over there.
Right. Yeah, there was a bit of a difference. I've had really good sushi here, so I definitely wouldn't knock anything that I've ever had on my home soil. But It was different. Sometimes in the way it was presented, also in the selection. I mean, I actually don't even know what I ate some of the times, because I couldn't read the menu, and there was the language barrier. And so sometimes it was just pointing and you ate what they brought you, which I know sounds kind of out there, but yes, but that's saying when in Rome, I thought, well, I'm in Japan, this is what you do. So I just ate it. And I definitely haven't been able to find anything quite like what I ate there in some of the smaller cities. So maybe in terms of selection, but not in terms of taste. I've had some really great stuff here.
I think for me, I have no idea how much tuna really was put into a lot of the sushi. And again, you have so many different, whether it's sashimi, whether it's rolls, whatever it might be, because like you, I don't know, I just say, oh yeah, I'd like a so-and-so or a dragon hand roll, whatever it might be, and I'm fine with it. But when I read this and thought, how much would this really make chain-wide, because we're talking a chain, over 600 pounds of tuna, because again, growing up, I'm used to the tuna in the can and opening it up and, oh yeah, this is a tuna. No, it's not. It's a very small, minute portion of a tuna when you really think
Absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to fathom, to wrap your head around how much tuna that really is, and then the return on investment for paying that much for the fish.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And when I heard this, Julia, because you get thinking of the healthy things, we of course get talking about our omegas and everything like that, and
Yes.
you think then delivery, like you said, you're handed it, you got to trust that it's made right, that it's
Yes.
good for you, because we're talking a raw fish in this case.
Yeah, you just have to trust that it's going to be what it should be, that it's going to be acceptable in terms of quality and taste too. I'm sure all restaurants have a, like a benchmark of quality and taste and what things taste like.
I love that the first
Yeah,
one
I mean,
you
it's
had-
really unfathomable.
Oh, it is. And I love that the first one you had was the authentic in Japan. Really cool.
Yes.
Follow us, folks, on Instagram and Twitter, if you would, to keep up with us, keep up with what's going on at Kelly & Co. AMI. You can do that on Instagram and Twitter at Kelly & Co. AMI. We've talked about eating for healthier hearts. Now let's talk about eating for healthier bones with nutritionist Julia Karantjas on the program. Julia, aside from calcium, what nutrients are important for our bones?
Yeah, calcium gets all of the attention, but it isn't enough at all. I mean, I think we have a little bit of a misconception that if we drink our, a glass of milk or a couple glasses of milk, eat some cheese, eat some yogurt, that we're going to have these strong, healthy bones. And that isn't really how things are lining up. It's a bit of an incomplete picture. And although calcium is important, it's not important. It isn't enough on its own. And it's not even just one or two other things that you need for healthy bones. It's actually quite a few things. You need minerals like magnesium, potassium, boron, and then you need a bunch of other vitamins like folic acid. Vitamin D is important, vitamin E is important, and vitamin K is also really important, and even vitamin C is important. So it's a pretty complex mineral in calcium, and it needs a lot of help to absorb. And also your bones require other things.
So, Julia, then if we say milk, you got to have more than milk. When I think of milk, and when I used to hear the commercials, when teachers in school would talk about it, doctor would say, hey, you got to keep drinking your milk. A lot of the things you listed are in there, but how much milk would you have to drink for it to be, if that was your sole resource of getting your calcium built up and the things to assist it, how much milk would you have to drink before we get into the foods and things that also can support us?
It would depend on your age, because different ages require different amounts of calcium. And the milk it has a lot of stuff, especially nowadays, but it isn't as complete a picture as I think we thought it was, let's say 20 years ago. We know it's not as high. It doesn't have vitamin K in it. We know vitamin K is extremely important for directing calcium where to go in the body. And as humans, actually, when we consume dietary K, like usually it's K1, we find our bodies don't convert it. And K2, which is what we actually need, we don't have in a lot of food, especially food that is a part of our North American diet. And therefore, there's a need to supplement. And so we know that that's just not in the quantities that we need in milk, or even the K2 is not in milk. The magnesium is not as high as it could be, for example. And so I think, drinking an extra glass of milk every day is really not the answer. If there's bone issues, I'm not saying it's going to hurt you. You definitely want to still consume your dairy for that calcium, but then there's other foods that would be better complemented as opposed to just increasing milk, because it would be a very incomplete picture nutritionally.
Well, we were told do it as children. Parents, make sure with the milk thing. As we get older and people do start worrying about bone density changing, all the things that we're told, is there kind of that magic age where people, as we know this should always be ongoing, regular maintenance, but is there a time where people really should be making sure the foods you're going to list, the milk, everything is part of that diet, even more so that they've determined? Have you found anything that says that? Or folks, let's just wake up and just stick with it?
Well, we know, after the age of 40 is a risk factor for osteoporosis. So if you are over the age of 40, or if you've had a very long history of breaking bones, we know these are risk factors for getting osteoporosis. So, maybe around that 40 mark, if, weightlifting, exercising when you are younger is great for bone density. We know for women, the loss of estrogen, so those menopausal years, is not great for bone density. And so for women specifically, it's, 40 and up. Men are around 40 to 45 as well in that category. But, you'd want to still focus on a really healthy diet before that. So
yes.
Your bones don't get weak.
Yeah.
Don't
because you would just not know until you have something happen. You trip, hurt your thumb, or trying to do something and land funny, or just an ankle turn that now, hey, I've got a broken bone where, I've turned my ankle 100 times, never had an issue. Do we want to get into the foods, Julia, that we really should think about incorporating?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, still have your milk, cheese, yogurt if that's something you like and that's, part of your diet. Leafy greens are really important. Kale, specifically. So kale, if you eat spinach, maybe swap out kale for spinach every now and again while you're at the grocery store. Oats are good. So if you eat oatmeal or any kind of granola, those are good to incorporate. Tahini, which is sesame seed paste. So lots of things you can do with that. I mean, it is an ingredient in hummus. So if you eat hummus, you're getting some tahini. You could also use tahini as a salad dressing base or the base of a dip of some sort, like make it into a condiment. And then broccoli, shrimp. So some vegetarian, vegan sources there, but also some animal sources. And then again, because you need a variety. You need the boron, you need the potassium, you need the magnesium, the vitamin D and the E and the K. And so that's where the variety of food is important. So again, not just the dairy, because the dairy gives us calcium, but we need a bunch of the other stuff to help.
How much do you get asked? And when you say the bunch, like how much do you get asked by everybody when you're talking to clients? Well, how much is how much? How much is a lot? Like how many helpings do I need of this stuff? Like again, we can contextualize, hey, have 12 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Oh my God. But how frequently? What would you say for someone, as we asked you before, what would be a good day's intake and how?
Okay, well, I haven't actually done all the math for all of the nutrients.
Right, of course.
That's why we have that, that's why we have the food guide and we have guidelines. Because people, we have those recommended daily allowances, those RDAs, they call them. And so that's where, it's all part and parcel of getting those 6 to 12 servings of grains and protein and fruits and vegetables. Because if you're eating, usually it's around 2,000 calories on average, depending on your height and obviously size, activity level, this will vary. But if you're eating a diet full of whole food, you would get close. So, around 2,000 calories, and then getting in all of those proper servings. But it is really hard to tell because, our farming practices, for example, I mean, you don't actually know. You can guesstimate how much of everything you're getting from your food, but if somebody's eating, a vegetable grown in Canada versus somewhere else, or, depending on where the shrimp is caught, these levels are going to vary, which I know seems like a very wishy-washy answer. And then I think, I'll bring it back to, for people that want to dive into the supplement world, it's not a bad idea, because with the supplement, you're getting direct doses and you're able to monitor it and kind of make an assumption, well, I have a good diet full of whole foods. I'm most likely getting, 2/3 of my recommended intake. But then just as an insurance policy, like just to top it up to make sure that I don't have any holes, I'll take the supplement on top of it to supplement what potentially is missing. And that's where, supplements can be a friend, an ally in our health and wellness journey.
Yeah, I know we try to make sure people are doing the right things, taking in the right foods to get, because I think that's the power, because some people just can't go necessarily the amount of vitamins, or certainly some people would rather. I just want to do it through vitamins and not be worried about it. But I think we need to be armed with all of it. And I love your comments about our soil, or you never really know. Julia, we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Julia Karantjas, joining us and really getting us kind of on ball here with how we're going to get our calcium into our body to make sure it works for us. And she joins us every week here on the program on Mondays. We're looking for members of the disability community to join our AMI research panel. Our research panel guides AMI, with our decisions as to everything we do here, including programming, media consumption, and accessibility, the most important one for so many of us out there, in one way or another. Participants are compensated for all long forms of studies. For more information, and in case you want to join the research panel, go to ami.ca/panel. We'd love to have you on board. Please sign up and join us now. One of the great pleasures of traveling is simply eating and actually eating. And as far as I'm concerned, and eating again, maybe even a little more. And according to describer J.J. Hunt, there's no better place to sample all that wonderful new food to you than at a night market. JJ, in your opinion, how come night markets are so perfect for hungry travelers, unless you're flying in at night and you're looking for something to eat, and voila, there it is. Welcome back.
That's it. Hey, Kelly, how's it going? Yeah,
Excellent.
I love a night market for, when you've just arrived in a place, you've been there for a long time, kind of doesn't matter. Anytime you're looking to eat when traveling, the night market is, in my opinion, the place to be, the place to go. The night market is just, there are all sorts of vendors who have all different kinds of foods out, so you can eat, you can sample little bits and pieces, and all around the world, there are different kind of versions of the night market. So whether you're in Southeast Asia or you're in Mexico, there's probably some version of a night market that you can find.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this to put it out there. Years ago, we would laugh at the hot dog vendors. You go to a ball game or something, there they were outside the stadium. You'd walk in Toronto between Union Station, the subway end and GO Transit end, and the railway service. There was the vendor, always been there for decades. So we would kind of what kind of street meat, and kind of chuckle. Hope to God we wouldn't get sick on it, but there was always that at the back of your mind, as much as you could say, oh, no, there's government legislation. Don't think of it that way. So now we fast forward to New York City, to L.A. Would I try it here? Yeah, I think a guy standing there, I'll go get a hot dog from him. Would we feel comfortable? How did you get around it, if you even had the thoughts, or the family, of, is this stuff safe? Yeah. I mean, it's after dark. We're out here on the street. That adds that extra element of questioning. How'd you get around it?
It does. And I have, you're right. Like, I've traveled with my family a fair bit. I've traveled with my kids. So first of all, there are advanced meds you can take that help with some of the base level kind of
like our Montezuma's Revenge and that kind of thing.
Exactly. Like that kind of.
Okay.
Totally. And so there are some meds you can take in advance that help eliminate that kind of surface level nastiness that can happen. But the other thing, the way I always look at it is, unless you're eating in, and frankly, even if you're eating in high-end restaurants, you don't know what's going on in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. You don't know what's going on the airplane.
Idea. You've no idea. No idea.
Exactly.
Whereas when you're at a stall, when you're at a market and you're seeing a version of that hot dog cart, whether it's it's that stainless steel cart with some lights all around it, but maybe it's in Southeast Asia, so there's a wok in the middle of it, or maybe there are some grill surfaces, or like you say in New York, where they're basically like a diner that's in a streetcar like a street cart format, right?
Right.
When you are at a market situation, you can check it out. You can smell the food. You know how many people are in line. So that's how fast the food is moving, is turning over. So that food is fresh. It's going to be cooked to order. My mother always used to like to say that that food carts are great because you can check under the cook's fingernails. You can see if they are clean.
I like that.
It's that was her way of looking at it.
Oh man,
and it's true. Yep. It's true. You can smell the food. You can hear the energy around that cart, and that goes a long way to indicating whether this is a place that is
and
popular,
they've been there forever,
right? Moving over.
You can tell by that crowd, the history, that this is, people are strolling at night, they're whipping over to this thing, so they're not going home and waking up in the morning sick or anything.
Exactly. And if the locals are eating there, that's exactly right. The locals are eating there because it has been good and continues to be good. No local who gets food poisoning is going to go back to that cart. So if you hear friendly conversations going on, even if it's not in your language, but if you hear like nice friendly chit chat going on between the vendor and the folks in line, that's a pretty good indication that this is a local, this is someone who people trust. So now I'm going to trust as well.
Okay, because you do wonder. And I mean, it's one thing to see a whole bunch of visitors, foreigners stopping, and hey, they're all tourists and everything like that. They don't know, we don't know. But when you have all those locals, it's a great thing. Do you want to start in Thailand and give me that description to not only of the food, even though I'm just anxious to hear that, where are you finding these? Where are they? In an alley? Are they just on the edge of the street? What does it sound and look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the first thing you do when you look for the night market is like, where is the sound? Where is the energy in the town or the village or wherever? And then, you literally walk toward the sound. And then as you get closer and closer, maybe there are some strings of lights that are hanging across. And you're absolutely right. Maybe it's an alleyway or a network of alleyways. Maybe close to that alley, there's a park that gets taken over at night. Or maybe there's an abandoned lot that it's no longer abandoned. Now this is the purpose for this lot, is for the night market. So, and the streets, alleys lined with these carts. And the hot dog cart's a good place to start. Stainless steel cart. Sometimes there's some kind of awning over it and the cook surface on top. That's something a lot of us in North America are familiar with. But then you really have to expand it, because maybe there's going to be a grill, or maybe there's going to be a huge wok, vats of soup or broth. There's all sorts. I went to a night market in Thailand where it was a noodle cart, and they went back and forth between doing pad thai and pad siu, and it was this massive wok, like, those what were those discs, like for sledding, for tobogganing?
Oh my God,
the flying saucer disc
things. Yeah, that size.
Like that. Just this wok was big enough I literally could have bathed in it. Yeah, it's enormous, enormous. And so they would do batch after batch of that. So those kinds of carts lining the street, and then maybe if it's on a street, not an alley, maybe there's a restaurant or two that's along there that kind of literally opens the doors, so that they become part of the market. And then often tiny little plastic stools or plastic tables nearby, so that if you are eating something like a bowl of soup that you're not going to carry with you, you can squat down low, sit at the cart, and eat.
Okay, so what they're serving the food into, is it throwaway stuff? Because I'm thinking how many people must be there serving, behind. And I was going to ask you the question. So we call it a night market. Are there multiple vendors generally around these, or generally one with several people working it, and they are only night? They're not there in the daytime.
Yeah, so it's a different place to place, right? But you touch on a really good point. This was something that my family and I really struggled with when we traveled, because when we're in Canada, we don't eat takeout in throwaway. We just don't do it. We just don't do plastic containers. We do everything we can to avoid it. But when you're traveling, it's extremely difficult. So we did a few things, like we carried around our own stainless steel cutlery. So stainless steel chopsticks, stainless steel spoons, and things like that. You can have a couple of plates with you. Sometimes you get a hard plastic soup bowl if you're in Thailand. So, and that gets reused, rewashed, and used over and over again. It's just like picnic ware almost. Sometimes stainless steel is used, but if you are taking your food away. The traditional way to wrap up that food, especially in Southeast Asia, would have been to wrap it in banana leaf and then to wrap that in newspaper. Increasingly, you're finding that that gets thrown away, and now everything's in a plastic bag or plastic container. That's really tricky. And then, is this a permanent thing, or is this an evening only thing? That's a really interesting question. In some parts of the world, like in lots of parts of Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, I've done a fair bit of traveling in. A lot of the markets tend to be evening only or weekend markets, and that alleyway just looks like a regular alleyway until about 5 p.m. and then suddenly everyone pulls their carts in and they start setting up, and it turns into this just joyous carnival kind of atmosphere. But in Mexico, the version of the night market that I've been to in different parts of Mexico is more like a permanent food court. So a bigger building on a street will be opened up, and all along the outer edge of that building will be like stalls, permanent stalls that are tiled in, like with kitchen tiles. They're tiny little micro restaurants, each one of them with a few stools sitting at a counter. And so you step up to the counter, you sit down, and I'll have some of that, some of that, some of that. And there's crowds of people gathered around, and those are permanent, used throughout the day and into the evening as well. Those kind of more permanent. Yeah, I'm not sure even what they're called. They are kind of like a food court.
But it's interesting because they're like that food stall. Did you notice if there was a connection to the building, what they preferred to associate those eateries with? Did it matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Some of those buildings in Mexico were clearly had been there for a long time. Like a lot of those booths, I could imagine these booths have been there since the 40s, since the 30s. Maybe they, some of the restaurants get a new tile job, but a few of the old ones have these really gorgeous old, like hand painted tiles, just amazing. So some of those buildings, I think, have been around serving the community's food for decades, like entire generations of people. This would be where you'd go for food. And the nice thing about those markets is, those food markets in Mexico, is you really get to sample lots of different kinds of food. And I think we've got a pretty not negative, we've got an understanding of Mexican food, I think, in Canada and some parts of the US, that it's like, well, it's all the same kind of mix of food, but whether you put it in a taco, you put it in a quesadilla, just on different things.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, no. You go to a proper market in Mexico, especially if you're in a place like Oaxaca, you get into like the moles. These are rich, like sauces that are closer to curries, like really rich gravies and flavor combinations that are extraordinary. The kind of thing you don't get in a, quote unquote Tex-Mex kind of Mexican restaurant, right?
So outside of what you described just now in Mexico, going back to Thailand or other places maybe where you've seen them, do they just kind of appear to be pop-up? I mean, it's interesting because the ones in the evening, do they try to go for that kind of pop-up, like you say, Ali, walk by it 6 times in the day, suddenly you walk by it and it's active with life and that kind of thing. But you think of dinner, but then you think afterward, what is it? After shows, is that what it's for? Who is the clientele eating at that time of night? Because you're always curious. Some countries, people tend to eat the heaviest stuff earlier in the day, some later, some round the clock. But there's obviously for these a cutoff time with these ones that look like that, JJ. Do they go out of their way to give you that pop up? Hey, here we are. Let's go. And you get your opportunity. Get it while it's hot and while it's here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think a lot of these markets, obviously, there's a lot of setup involved. There's a lot of coordination involved with lights, especially if there are like lights strung across. Sometimes there are cleanup crews that move in, move out. Like, there is a lot of orchestration,
especially washing stuff, even to make it, like you said, sanitary.
Yeah. Totally. And you've got people like there are operations that will move in and bring in fresh produce, fresh food throughout the evening to keep the food fresh, to keep it moving. There's all kinds of orchestration. And a lot of these markets have been going in the same place for years and years and years. And yet they still have that energy, that feeling of like, I've just discovered, like, you know, this place wasn't I walked down this alley at noon and nothing was here. And yet here we are again at 9 o'clock at night. And it's this thriving energy. So that's a really cool, it's a bit of a trick that gets played, and it's a fun one. Like, it really does feel that way. And then you're right, there are like waves of, like, you know, there might be some tourist waves. 6 o'clock in the evening, it's dinner time in a fair bit of the West. So that's when a lot of the tourists come out and and then there are waves of folks who are coming in and getting ingredients and taking home. So there's a vendor in the market, a local knows that they do a really good, whatever it is, they do a certain cut of meat. So they'll go to the market, they'll get that meat, take it home and add it to whatever they're cooking for dinner. So then there's that wave of people who are using it as a way of buying ingredients or part of their meal to cook. And then there's the late night crew. Oh, it's like, you know, after going to the Biohoy, after getting a few too many drinks, gotta go to the market and like fill my body with noodles so that I can sober up again in time for work tomorrow. So you get these waves of people over the course of the evening that use the place. And if you have the opportunity to go as a traveler outside of the time when it's tourist time, and you can see the market in these different moments with the different clientele, if it's safe to do that, if you're comfortable doing that, if you can stay awake long enough, that's a blast.
Wow. And I bet as they're getting ready to pack up, some nice deals on the price of the food, you know, that they want to move before the next day, and such choice. I mean, we have a lot of choice in now the food trucks, but this is what they've done for years. Anywhere else? We got a couple of minutes that you want to mention?
Oh, I mean, the one kind of market we haven't quite mentioned is like the Medina in Fez in Morocco. I loved eating at the Moroccan markets. And during the day, you know, there's food spread out throughout the Medina. And the Medina has these like tunnel, like warren, like labyrinth, like corridors, really hard. I mean, you can get lost in there so easily. So at night, tend not to go in there, tend to eat in the kind of more restaurant-y strips. And again, more permanent little mini restaurants. But when I say mini, I'm talking about restaurants, entire restaurants that include kitchen area, serving area, and seating area, the size of my bathroom. How they managed to squeeze all of this in is extraordinary. Oh, and you get a tagine and maybe some preserved lemons from over there, some fresh bread from over there. And Kelly, it is a feast. It's just extraordinary. Oh, gotta go back to Morocco soon.
It's hard to believe too, the people who would be like, the business would be good enough for people getting into the Medina, moving around in there, but like you say, for you guys saying no, I'd rather do it outside. But for those who do and get into those, how phenomenal, JJ, and what descriptions. Before we run though, you got to tell me about the smell. What tends to dominate? The meat smell? Is it too hard to tell, or is it more of those, you know, like the curry like stuff?
Yeah, in the Medina, the smell of grilled meat really carries. Like, it really does. It feels like that's the one that's going to go up and down that corridor. When you're standing in front of the olives, the pickled, the preserved booth, it is such a sharp, fresh. It's like, it just hits you like a wave. And then, of course, anytime there's a deep fryer going, that's when I'm gonna like float over like a little cherub in a cartoon, like lift off the ground and flutter on over to the deep fried smell.
Oh, good heavens, man. Obviously, thank you for your sounds, your descriptions, what you see, and those smells, JJ. Always wonderful to talk. Thanks again. And of course, even extra bonus, wonderful talking food. We'll talk to you next month.
Have a good one, Kelly.
Oh boy, JJ Hunt joining us, and we were talking about the night markets that he's encountered on his travels. We thank Danielle Jongkind for being a part of the program as well today. And of course, we talked nutrition with Julia Karantjas. Lots of great stuff to go back. Check us out, please, through our podcast and on YouTube. You can email us, kellyco@ami.ca, and call us at 1-866-509-4545. On our next program, love is love. But what happens when society places assumptions on what a relationship should look like? Join Marco Pasqua as he shares his experiences navigating an interabled relationship with his wife, Karen, and how they used it as a way to educate, challenge stigmas, and shift perspectives on love and disability. That on the next edition of Kelly and Company. Fedora's off to you.
Thanks for tuning in to Kelly and Company. Follow us on all social media, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more.